Recording. So welcome and thank you all so much for tuning in to Webinar for Busy Lawyers. We are delighted to have you here. Webinars for Busy Lawyers are put on by LCL Mass LOMAP, and it's a way for you to gain some practical knowledge that will help you in your practice of law in a short amount of time. We know that you are all busy. We want to be able to implement what you learn in your practice today, and today's topic on what lawyers need to know to maintain heart health and mental well-being is especially appropriate, especially as this month is Heart Health Month. As a background too, Tracey and I are both part of LCL Mass LOMAP. If you are not familiar, this is an organization that provides free confidential legal services to legal professionals in Massachusetts. We have free confidential consultations and a lot of other services on our websites, lclma.org and masslomap.org. Before I turn it over to Tracey, I'd like to let you know a little bit about her. Dr. Tracey Meyers will be our presenter today. She is our newest staff clinician. She has worked for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. She has also started a number of wonderful programs for us, including her mindfulness and yoga groups. If you have any questions, we will take questions at the end. Please put it in the Q&A at the chat. And Tracey, take it away. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Laura. So happy to be here as well. And really excited to present on heart health because it really speaks to this intersection between the mind, body, and how we can influence both through different practices today. So I'm going to share my screen and start off. I'm a PowerPoint person. It just helps to always orient. So let's start from here. Okay. All right. So as Laura introduced us at LCL, and a little bit about our services. And we do both individual consultation, practice management, and we also do different support groups and programs like this. So I'd like to just pause for a moment and just take a little breath. So the heart of meditation really, and we'll be talking some about meditation and other ways that we can really help with our overall health and mind-body connection. So let's just take a pause for a few moments. Wherever you are, I'm just seeing if you might take a few breaths. What's that little space to pause between the next activity, the next thought? Perhaps even placing a hand on the heart. I like to sometimes start my meditation practice that way, just taking a few breaths and feel the gentle support of a hand on the heart and then a few breaths. Just to feel settled, helping ourselves come back into the present moment. And then releasing the hands. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about health disease and lawyer risk in particular, looking at some of the signs and symptoms of heart issues, and then going to the heart of the matter and talking about stress, anxiety, anger. Those are the kind of the biggies that can really affect our overall cardiac and heart and psychological functioning. Talk about some lifestyle changes, and then a specific kind of meditation that I'd like to share with you that can be very helpful in terms of improving our cardiovascular health. All right, so let's talk about the mind-heart connection. So we have heart and cardiac issues is the #1 killer in the United States. 655,000 people die a year. And so this is a major health concern. 1 out of every 4 deaths are related to cardiac issues. Heart disease leading cause of death for both men and women. And coronary heart disease specifically is the most common type of heart disease. Heart attacks, 805,000 people are having them. 1 in 5 are silent attacks, meaning that people don't even know that they've had them. And then we can look at the dollar amount, $219 billion per year costs related to cardiac issues. So this is a CDC report from 2020. So I put this little slide in, think medical before psychological. We are under so much stress, and lawyers are under so much stress right now from every field that you can imagine, from our solo practitioners to people working for probate and family court, and we go on and on. And often we can mistake our psychological symptoms, which might or feel psychological, anxiety, shortness of breath, some of those physiological arousal symptoms that we think might not be physical, and we often can discount them. So just this idea of thinking medical before psychological, not chalking things up to, oh, it's nothing. So, as we know, men and women experience heart symptoms in different ways. Particularly females tend to have more of that tiredness and fatigue, which again can look like many other things because many of us are really tired, right? So these are things that, it's important to get checked out. And if you're noticing them on a regular basis, rather than just saying, I'm just stressed, right? So stress can sometimes cover what actually could be a medical condition. And even if it is just stress, as we'll talk about, there are important considerations around how to reduce it. But we always want to assume first, this could be medical, right? We don't want to overlook the obvious and then end up having a silent event or something that's more serious that could have been prevented. All right, so for lawyers in particular, let's talk a little bit about the mind-heart connection. So the three leading causes of death for lawyers are heart disease, which mirrors, the rest of the country, cancer, and suicide. So heart disease and cancer are similar to the rest of the population, but for lawyers in particular, suicide is the third rather than the 10th. And that just shows, again, this chronic level of stress and mental health duress that many lawyers are experiencing. Lawyers are particularly susceptible to stress-related issues because if you think about like the demands of what it takes to be a lawyer, how many hours people are working, the level of hostility, and we're going to look at that role of hostility and anger on the nervous system, what that can do to our cardiac functioning. Men in particular who have a heightened level of hostility and aggression. We kind of think about like type A personalities are particularly susceptible to having cardiac issues. And then lawyers tend to have unhealthy lifestyles. So this is per lawyer report that in terms of diet and not having enough exercise. So these can be ongoing challenges in terms of overall health and well-being and preventing cardiac issues. All right, so let's continue. So let's talk a little bit about reducing anger, hostility, and depression. No small task, and so I certainly don't want to say that that's an easy task, but what are some ways that we can reduce the intensity of our experiences so that it's not causing a toll on the body? So those of you who have seen a couple of my presentations, I like to just do a very brief discussion about the mind-body connection with stress. And over again, we can look at these key elements. Number one is that we have a demand or a stressor. And for lawyers, this could be an angry client, right? Or it could be a hostile opposing counsel, right? So we have a demand or a stress. And then how we perceive the situation. Do I think I can manage this? Or do I feel like I'm going to fail, right? That appraisal, how we view ourselves and how we view our capacity, that affects our stress response. So if we feel like I can't handle this situation, I may get overwhelmed with anxiety. Or if I feel furious and upset, like, how could this happen to me? I may get really angry, right? So how we think about the situation, we have a stressor, a thought, and then a reaction in the nervous system. And too much over-arousal can cause chronic anxiety or chronic anger. And that plays a big part in some of the cardiac issues. And this is just another slide looking at when we're optimally functioning, we stay in this lovely green window of tolerance. But if we're overactive and we're in this red zone over and over again, that again is a way that we affect our overall physical and mental health. We're secreting hormones called cortisol, which is our stress response hormone. And cortisol is toxic to the body. So while it can be helpful in an immediate situation of danger, too much cortisol can weaken and impact different organ systems in the body, including the heart. So imagine these adrenaline rushes, right? Cortisol gives that jolty feeling, and over time, that can cause ongoing issues with blood pressure and cardiovascular health. This is the gloom and doom part of the presentation. It does get a little more positive. Okay, so think about, all right, so we need to work with our anger, our anxiety, our nervous system imbalance. And so we can think about that in terms of coping skills. Coping skills are techniques to manage difficult emotions or problems. There are two kinds of coping skills, right? There are adaptive coping skills, which I'm going to focus on in a few moments. These are things that help us feel better, and they also create a sense of well-being. And then we have maladaptive coping skills, which we're using them to help us cope with stress, but they can become destructive over time. They might have started out like, having a cookie and feeling, okay, that tastes really good. And then we could start noticing we're binge eating, we're eating too many cookies or a glass of wine, or we yell and we get all those negative feelings out, but then we start to create anger management problems. So maladaptive coping skills are the areas that actually can continue creating stress, even if it has a momentary reduction. We're looking for more sustainable, healthy, adaptive coping skills that in the long run can help us feel better. So we'll talk about what these are. So let's talk a little bit about these healthy coping skills or lifestyle changes for heart health and well-being. So one is, how do we reduce anger and aggression? You saw in that slide about the window of tolerance that meditation and mindfulness breathing can be helpful. We're going to do a practice later. Skillful communication, learning how to really actively listen, actively give feedback, how to know when it's timely. So really practicing that piece of how to communicate. That's going to be a future topic I want to explore with the legal community around mindful communication. Getting mentoring or counseling to help. That is really helpful to just figure out other ways to be able to express yourself clearly. Focusing on generating solutions rather than emotional stressors. So often I was just, talking to a client about, they felt like their management in their firm wasn't listening, and that each time they went to the manager, they got more frustrated. They felt like out of control rather than focusing on what was helpful. So we talked about how they could focus on what was helpful for them rather than trying to focus on what they weren't getting from management. What would help them to work on it was actually a workload issue. What would help them to feel more balanced? So finding ways to control what you're able to control rather than the focus outward, that can help with our overall response to stress. And these last two, of course, we know, but especially for lawyers, we know that lawyers need exercise and to maintain good nutrition, because you're working so many hours and really taking time to take care of this body of ours. And then the long work hours, with the work-life balance being so awry right now, many lawyers that I speak to are saying, I'm working till 10, or I've got to start working once the kids are in bed and get that brief out. And so those long hours, we actually don't have time to replenish. And that also can be a risk factor for our overall heart health. Another piece, and I found this idea about, like, what are our values? And when we're in the throes of stressful situations, we can lose sight of, like, well, what's the bigger picture? Stress in a way narrows our bandwidth, just like that window of tolerance. We become like almost tunnel vision. We're caught in that cycle. And so going back to, like, what actually matters most to me. And this is a really helpful thing to do with a counselor, with a peer support, in a support group, like just really thinking about what are the most important things for my quality of life. And then when we actually are able to look at some of these things, the balance, or where we're imbalanced, starts to become more clear, right? So these core values can also play a role in decreasing stress, especially if we realize, like, wow, I haven't been nourishing at all my spirituality, or I'm recognizing there's this, conflict with who I am as a lawyer and who I am as a person. And so just looking at these values again as an ongoing source of reducing stress and improving our sense of well-being. So mindfulness, of course, a topic near and dear to me, and the idea of looking at what's good for the mind is good for the heart. So this is kind of the double bonus, that we know mindfulness is helpful for stress. We know mindfulness is good for anxiety, but it also is good for the heart. So there's something called heart rate variability that I want to share with you if you're not familiar with that term. It's called HRV. So HRV measures how quickly the heart can make a small change in the interval between each heartbeat. So high heart rate variability, that doesn't mean high blood pressure or fast heart, but it means really flexible heart rate variability, meaning that our heart rate goes up appropriately when there's stress and then goes back down appropriately when there's no stress. So it adjusts well to the different conditions. So high heart rate variability is what we're aiming for. That allows us not to stay in a stress response. If we had low heart rate variability, that means we might be staying at an elevated stress response. Our heart rate's not going down, even though the stressors or the demands have gone down. Or for some people, if they're depressed, the heart rate variability may be very, very low. And so they have difficulty even engaging enough kind of energetically to get through tasks. But in general, when we're talking about lawyers, we're really often thinking about more of that difficulty with lowering the heart rate. So the good news is that regular mindfulness practice, even 5 minutes a day, can raise the heart rate variability. And we'll talk about a couple of programs at the end, and we're going to do a practice that addresses heart rate variability. And it can be very, very helpful. Those of you who have struggled maybe with a traditional mindfulness practice may enjoy some of the specific HRV practices that I'm going to share. Meditation can modestly lower the blood pressure, somewhere between 3.2 to 4.7. But that's still, that alone, think about what we have to use sometimes medication wise to lower our blood pressure. But here we can if we just are practicing breathing, that alone can lower our blood pressure. And I've seen studies that are higher with, longer, more sustainable practices. All right, so just a very brief discussion of mindfulness, since I've talked about it already. Most of you are familiar with this idea of paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and cultivating awareness of the mind and body, living in the here and now. These are two definitions. And really when we're talking about like a state, mindfulness, both as a state of mind, like a way to just come back into the present moment. And then specifically, we're going to talk about mindfulness meditation. And that is taking, somewhere between 5 minutes and 30 minutes or more, and practicing by focusing on the breath or the body, or, we'll have different ways that we can do it, even sounds. There's different kinds of meditation practices that you can apply. We know through the research that the more that we're in the present moment, the more that we bring mindfulness into a regular kind of aspect or part of our day, we feel happier. This is a study that I love to share just about that fact that our minds wander often. A wandering mind. They wander about half of the time. You probably have already had many mind wanderings during this presentation. But the more that we can bring ourselves back to the present moment, the better we feel. So lots of different ways to practice. Like Laura said, I've been teaching a weekly mindfulness and yoga practice. So that's a way to come into the mind and body. For some of us, it's listening to the sound of our breath or listening to music. There's many different ways. There's no one right way. But the idea of doing practices that help steady the mind and ultimately are going to help with our overall cardiovascular health as well. We can do weaving informal practices throughout the day, like just going outside and having some sunshine. This morning, I was so happy to see the sun. Like all of us, we haven't seen the sun in a while. And just sitting, and I just had the warm sun sort of sitting, bathing my face as I did a little bit of breathing practice in yoga this morning. It's really, I think the sun was more curative than the yoga. And then we can do formal practices as well. I want to spend a moment now talking about coherent breathing. This is the practice I'd like us to explore today. So coherent breathing is also known as conscious breathing, and it's a form of meditative breathing that involves taking long, slow breaths at somewhere around a rate of 5 per minute, 5 breaths per minute. And we're going to have time doing equal periods of inhalation and exhalation. So we're slowing the breath down. So many of us are breathing much faster than 5 breaths per minute. So some of us might even be at a 10 breath per minute. And so we're going to slow it down. And so it has a gentle flow, and we'll be matching in-breath and out-breath, somewhere around 4 to 6 beats for the inhale and 4 to 6 beats for the exhale. And when I mean beats, it's like a counting. And so I'm going to demo that in a moment. Coherent breathing helps to calm the body. It actually allows the nervous system to settle down. And it's specifically, this type of breathing can help with heart rate variability, which is really key to our heart health. So that's a little bit about coherent breathing. I'm going to just share the steps and then we'll do the practice together. So we're breathing, if we can, through our nose with our eyes closed. Okay. So if you're having like stuffed up breath, then you can certainly keep your mouth open as well. So we're breathing in through the nose and either out through the mouth, or you can even keep the mouth closed if your nose is clear today, and you could just do the breathing just through the nose. For some of us, it feels more comfortable to exhale through the mouth. So it doesn't matter which way you do that. And taking your time, and I'll guide you so you know how to practice. You'll be counting, I'll be counting, and you'll breathe in and out. We'll start with 2 beats, then 3 beats, and then 4 beats. Okay, so I'll be counting and we'll be breathing at the same time. So let's do a couple of rounds, and then I'm going to play it with some music. The music was designed by Dr. Richard Brown, who I was able to study with. He is a psychiatrist who's done a lot of work on coherent breathing. And he has created these lovely rhythms that you can use your breath to match. So you don't even have to worry about the counting, and it can be deeply relaxing. So I hope you'll enjoy this. So let's begin. I'm going to guide you first with my voice, and then we'll use the chimes as well. So I'm going to come off the PowerPoint now, and let's begin by first taking a few natural breaths just to find the natural rhythm of the breath. Okay. Breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Seeing if you can relax your body. And take one more breath this way, just relaxing as you breathe in and out. And then on the next breath, breathe into a count of 2. So breathe in, 2. Breathe out, 2. Breathe in, 2. Breathe out, 2. And now we'll do to a count of 3. Breathe in, 2, 3. Breathe out, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so pause, and I'm going to play the tones now, and you're going to hear the music. You'll breathe in as the music rises, and then you'll breathe out as the music descends. Okay, and just see how this feels. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Keep going, just listening to the sound. Let's do 2 more rounds. And just come back to your natural rhythm of breath. And slowly, when you're ready, we'll have you open your eyes and come back. And just notice how you feel. I'm going to share my screen once more. So that's a practice called Coherent Breathing. This is from Richard Brown. I put his little book down here, The Healing Power of the Breath. And also HeartMath is another very, very popular, really well-researched program for coherent breathing and heart rate variability. So a couple of haikus I found about heart health. Got goals, scared to start. It only takes small changes for a healthy heart. Take deep breaths, stress less, be smoke-free, move more, eat green, and do things for me. So those are our haikus for our heart health. So thank you so much for taking the time to do a little bit of breathing and learning a little bit more about some practices for heart health for lawyers. And I'm happy to answer some questions now if anyone has any they'd like to share. Oh, Laura, I think you're muted. Let's see.
I am. Thank you. It's going to say thank you so much, Tracey. This was absolutely marvelous. It helped as you talked about stress, recognizing medical conditions, thinking about coping mechanisms, healthy habits, core values, heart rate variability, mindfulness meditation, coherent breathing. That was wonderful. We have a number of questions. We'll go over some, and I encourage people too, as you have more questions, to be inputting them into the chat as well. So the first is, will you be distributing the slides, and is the PowerPoint available to download? I missed a few minutes from the beginning. Yes, this presentation will be available. Our wonderful marketing manager will put this up in the next day or two onto the website for the recording and the slides both, so which will be available there. We have a number of people writing in saying thank you. One person wrote they're curious about the source of the statistic that suicide is the third highest cause of death. I did a quick look, as I know that you probably were so busy with your research and all of this. It looks like that was quoted in CNN and the Lawyer's Epidemic on Depression, Suicide, and Substance Abuse, a number of other sources. I couldn't find the exact study. I don't know if you happen to know or have more information on that, and then we'll go to some other questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I do have that, but I don't have the source immediately. But I'm happy to put that in when we look at the slides. I'll put that into the slides so folks can have that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Another person writes, do you recommend any free apps for coherent breathing?
Yeah, there's a couple of really good free apps. So there's something called iBreathe and the Breathe app. Both of those, iBreathe and Breathe, and they actually, you can set the timer so you can actually match your in-breath and out-breath, and it will go up with you. You can see like the numbers rise. So if you want to set like a 4-4 like we were doing, you can watch it go up and down, and you can expand it to, so if you start to find that you have more capacity, somewhere like around 6 beats for the in-breath, 6 to the out, you can actually adjust it on the app. And I find those to be really helpful.
Wonderful. Oh, and they want to know, Terry, I'm not sure if you were noting when you said, please say what the website is. If you would clarify in the comments, then we'll address your question. That would be great. I'm not sure which website you're referring to right now. Another question is, how do big law firms deal with this?
Yeah, I think, you know, the even just the well-being check-ins and having people just really acknowledge like what their balance is right now. And I think having like, if there's healthy activities people can do together, like getting together on a Zoom call and doing some practice, encouraging people, even like saying, hey, this app is great. Like I've been using this. I like to do that. I like to sometimes, we call it accountability, but not in the sense of like judgment, but like, okay, I actually do have a meditation buddy, and we'll text each other and say, hey, I was able to practice. So I think with law firms, just inviting a culture of sharing resources and accountability, and then potential practice times, like I think starting a meeting or ending a meeting with some gentle practice. So I think sharing resources and accountability is the easiest way to help each other.
That's a great point on both resources and accountability. This may be a it depends question, but suggestions if you have for a best time of day to meditate.
A great question. You know, in general, people feel that we're most sustainable when we have a practice at the same time each day. And usually the morning is preferable, only that life gets in the way. And if you put things off, we tend to then get too busy to practice. So morning for that reason can be very helpful. But that being said, other people like to do it at night because it can help go into, you know, a more restful sleep. I'm kind of like of the notion that whatever works. And so sometimes having these little snacks, like on like mindful snacks, little times during the day. My goal is really for people to practice often. And so, for sustainability, I'd say morning time, just for that practical piece. But if you can just do small practices throughout the day, that's also very helpful.
That is wonderful. Oh, and on the website, they were looking for how to find the slides later. Yes, and
Yeah.
I'll type this into the chat in a moment. You can find it on masslomap.org, webinars for busy lawyers, to both see this one and all of our past webinars for busy lawyers as well. Someone else notes the figures on suicide were stunning. Can you speak to early warning signs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So early warning signs often are, some of the signs of depression, but they're depressive symptoms that have lasted at least 2 weeks, often longer. Feelings of hopelessness, despondency, not enjoying life or getting pleasure out of life as one normally would. Oftentimes there's isolation, chronic feelings of inadequacy. But I often look for, when I'm working with clients, if they're really struggling with things like appetite, sleep, motivation, can't get going in the day. And then asking them if they're having worried thoughts, or if they're, and I'll ask people, and, for colleagues, sometimes just checking in, noticing, are you feeling hopeless? Are you feeling like giving up? And starting a dialogue with people. And, I think that compassionate way of asking people if they're struggling. But the early warning signs are more of that, like prolonged depression, where it's affecting sleep and appetite and physiological health. Those are sometimes, warning signs for people. iBreath, yes. So iBreath, there's one that's iBreathe, and there's one, oops, it just corrected me. I'm trying to write this out. iBreathe. Let's see if it'll let me do that without, it keeps auto correcting, but it's the I in front of breathe. And then there's a breathe app. There's 2 separate ones that allow us to do that. And those of you who really want to learn about coherent breathing, check out Heart Math. It's a whole program, but it's very well researched. Doctors often recommend that program because it really has some good data. It's kind of a biofeedback program using coherent breathing, really targeting blood pressure and this HRV that we've been talking about today.
Wonderful. So, and for those who are wondering, that's in response to a question that came in about to repeat the app on coherent breathing. And as Tracey just noted, there's iBreathe and Breath, and that's also Heart Math is a great resource. Another note is that we will send the recording to all those who were registered. So if you're looking for the slides, as many of you were in the recording, that will be available there as well. Tracey, do you have thoughts on, for people that may be overwhelmed, with where a good starting point for them would be? You mentioned a number of wonderful goals to start with. Do you have suggestions for people who think, I'm just not sure where to dive in first?
Yeah, like I love actually starting with the smallest of small steps. So of course, like my view is always to start with the breathing, because it's something we do anyway, right? And it doesn't require apps, it doesn't require anything, but just starting to really get in touch with being able to slow the breath down, being able to take these mindful pauses. So setting that goal of 5 minutes a day, is usually where I really invite people to start. I mean, there's so many, I mentioned so many things on the slides around health and diet and exercise, but I think, the 2 that come to mind that are the most basic are, one is to practice the breathing. And the second is to really focus on getting support. So whether that is with, like in law firms, finding a buddy, or, joining a support group that we have at LCL, or talking to a counselor, but that other piece, because that chronic stress and making lifestyle changes, it's really hard to do on our own. We all fail, right? How many New Year's resolutions do we break by January 6th or 5th or 3rd? So, it's like that sustainability. We need help. We need people to do it with us, so I think those are the 2: support and the focusing on the breath.
That is great. We have another person wrote in, said, thank you so much. They already suffer from depression, anxiety, so anything that can help is greatly appreciated.
Definitely. Oh, I see that other question. Lawyers, stressful professions. Yeah. So lawyers are up there. When they look at physicians, other, mental health folks, like they're lawyers in particular, because of the adversarial nature of the work for many of you, not everybody, but that in itself creates this level of, overactive nervous systems often, you know, and when you're in that kind of level of adversarial work, it actually is more stressful than other professions, even when, you know, major life death decisions are on the line, for example, for doctors. But that chronic level of aggression and hostility makes lawyers in a way a unique group that have higher than average stress levels.
I just want to note something for all attendees too. Tracey recently wrote an article, an outstanding article for Lawyers, Mass Lawyers Weekly, about understanding anger and its impact on lawyers, which is something to think about for heart health and mindfulness as well. Let's see, we have another person. Thank you for reminding us to stop and see the world around us and to breathe. Yes, incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is a great topic, you know, I think again about just the intersection of our health and our well-being mentally and physically, you know, and so I love this idea of Heart Health Month, and how we can use some of the same methods that help us physically, also emotionally, and vice versa.
Definitely. Yes, this is wonderful. And it's to really, I think, important to think about holistic health, as you've noted on so many examples, and how it will help not only your professional life, but your personal one as well, and healthfulness going forward. So it looks like we have addressed all the questions in the chat. I also want to be respectful of Tracey's time. Oh, we have one more question. Oh, a few more. Okay, if you have more,
That's fine.
we'll do a few more.
Sure.
All right, so one person notes, do you have any food recommendations?
Yeah, that's the hard one. You know, one of the, and then that's, you know, we could speak volumes about different food choices. And the pieces that I like really emphasize with people is really the mindful approach to eating. I found that the ability to really notice what we're eating, slowing down our eating, really allowing the taste to become, you know, in the foreground. I find that that piece slows it down, helps me eat less. I end up choosing things that are actually taste better because, you know, when we're eating quickly or we're going for sugar, we're not always tasting what we're eating. So I like this idea of mindful eating, of stopping when the body's full, eating when the body's hungry, really checking into like, what does my body really need? And sometimes that is more helpful for me than the diets or, you know, ruling in certain foods and ruling out certain foods. It's a little bit more of a gentle approach, but it also listens to more of the intuitive, wise self in us.
Makes good sense. Another person notes that this is especially good now as COVID has made things so much more difficult. Gyms are closed and being at home is very stressful. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, right. So a lot of the physical, and now we're in the winter, right? So it's like getting outside is super hard. So I love the indoor practices of some gentle movement, of breath, and knowing that like that too is really helpful, especially in the, I like sometimes think seasonally about winter as a really good time to do breath and meditation, and get our bodies prepared for spring when we can be more active.
Mhm. Another person notes they have started growing veggies and a hydroponic garden in their house, and that is certainly helping. It's not cheap, but it's a very good investment.
Ah, I love that. What a night. Like I just had this, you know, cheerful view of like a cold winter day with lovely vegetables growing.
That is.
Yeah.
Tracey, do you want to tell us a little bit more too about your mindfulness and yoga classes and when they meet and how people can join?
Please, yeah. So it's on the LCL website, and I offer weekly. It'll be today. It's Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, and we do a short practice, about 20 minutes. We do some meditation and then some movement. It's suitable for all levels. You know, we've been doing a variety of different things. Some things on the ground, some things in the chair, and really just inviting people to practice where they're at. I try to do like a little theme too, so something a little psychological, as well, so that we can, you know, bring some mind body practices, but it's really to move and hopefully to reduce stress. And then we hang out and chat like what we're doing today. So people that are interested in just seeing other people practice and talk about some mind body interventions. So it's free. It's on the website. And then we have Rachel, who is our master marketing director. She created a YouTube channel so you can watch the links if you'd like to practice at a different time.
That is excellent. Michael, if you could expand a little bit more on your inquiry, I'm not quite sure the context you're looking for. He asks, will some lawyers tell their personal stories to colleagues?
Oh, I think maybe he mean, well, we'll see what Michael, I was just thinking about like, yeah, whether people are willing to share, you know, if worried about a colleague. thinking maybe that's, and I think that is hard when you're asked, when you're noticing some challenges in a colleague, and I think often it's just helpful to sometimes share a personal story back and just say, I reached out in the past, or my wife or my, this person reached out for help and it really made a difference. So sometimes those personal sharings, you don't have to reveal much, but like just a personal story of success for someone who reached out for mental health counseling can be really helpful. So it doesn't feel like you're telling them to do that, or that, you're exposing them, but just really gently sharing, like, yeah, when people have a hard time, I know so and so's really benefited from reaching out. Oh, thanks,
Yes.
Rachel. I see Rachel.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So for people who are seeking how to register for weekly yoga, as Tracey was talking about, Rachel, our wonderful marketing manager, has just put that in the chat, and that's also in the lclma.org website.
So come today. We're going to do some practices.
So this has been wonderful. Tracey, thank you so much for sharing your time and advice with us. This has truly been absolutely wonderful. Oh, we have one more thing. I'm on the board of NAMI Mass. We have a program called In Our Own Voice, which has volunteers. And then it looks like there were a couple typos, but so NAMI Mass is also a great resource as well.
It is. Yeah. I love that the NAMI groups throughout the US are phenomenal in terms of supporting family members and friends who have struggled with mental illness. So Michael said he's typing too fast. No, that's super helpful and wonderful organization. I've worked with a lot of them here in Connecticut as well.
That is good. So I want to let people know as well, as noted, we will have a recording and slides on a website, and if you registered in advance, those will be sent to you. I also wanted to thank you everyone again for tuning in, and to stay tuned. Our next webinar for busy lawyers will be about sleep, on why lawyers need it and tips to improve. And that will be also with our wonderful LCL MA colleague, Dr. Sean Healy. That will be sometime in March. The date, stay tuned. But thank you so much for tuning in. Tracey, thank you so much for taking us through this wonderful presentation. You are very calming and soothing as you talk about such an important topic. And we are very grateful to you. And I hope that you and everyone else have a terrific afternoon. If you have a few closing words, please feel free to share.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I love these like short webinars just to be able to take a time. I mean, you guys are all doing exactly what we're asking today, which is just taking time, practicing some breath work and taking time for yourself to really nourish yourself during these challenging times. We know everyone's really tired and a lot of stress. So just give yourself a pat in the back for taking, time during your busy day to come and do something for your wellness and well-being. So thank you.
Very true. Thank you so much, Tracey. Thank you all. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and certainly look into signing up for weekly yoga and mindfulness as well. And oh, we have more comments. Thank you so much to Dr. Meyers for the awesome presentation. I echo that. This was terrific. Thank you so much, Tracey.
All right, everyone. Be well.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Take care. Bye-bye.